My name's Celine, I'm 22, and the day I came home from university was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, until I found all my belongings dumped in soggy boxes outside what used to be my home. My parents had sold the house, without even telling me. I still can't forget that moment. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more family betrayal and emotional courage stories. The air felt lighter than it had in months as the bus rolled into my neighborhood. I remember pressing my forehead against the cool glass, watching the rows of houses blur by, each one dressed in neat lawns and autumn leaves that looked painted by hand. I had rehearsed the moment in my head a dozen times, stepping off the bus, walking up the driveway, hearing my mom's voice from the kitchen, and the smell of her Sunday roast drifting through the air. Home, my safe place after 4 long years of struggling through exams, sleepless nights, and cafeteria coffee that could strip paint off a wall. But what waited for me wasn't the home I had left behind. When the bus stopped, I grabbed my backpack and suitcase, smiling without even realizing it. I'd texted Mom 2 hours ago, "Can't wait to see you guys." But she never replied. That wasn't unusual. She wasn't much of a texter. Still, something inside me wanted a reply this time. The walk from the bus stop to our house took less than 10 minutes. My sneakers crunched on the dry leaves as I turned the corner, expecting to see our cherry tree Dad had planted it the year I was born. I smiled at the thought, but then my steps slowed. The cherry tree was gone. I froze. The yard looked empty. The garden bed Mom loved so much was stripped bare, the fence freshly painted white. My heart did a strange little flip, confusion replacing excitement. And then I saw them, boxes, cardboard boxes, about a dozen of them, stacked near the sidewalk. Some had my name written in black marker. I blinked, thinking I was imagining it. Then I dropped my suitcase and walked closer. My books, my college trophies, my old guitar case, even the faded blue blanket Grandma had given me, all piled in the open, the cardboard already damp from last night's rain. "What the?" I whispered. I spun toward the house, but something inside me went cold. The front door was different. The curtains were gone. The porch light, a little sunflower-shaped one Dad installed himself, was missing. And through the front window, I saw unfamiliar furniture. I felt my chest tighten. No, no, no. I climbed the steps and rang the doorbell, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the sound. A man in his late 30s opened the door. He looked surprised to see me. Can I help you?" he asked, polite but guarded. "Yeah, this is my house," I said, my voice shaky. I live here." He frowned. "You must have the wrong place." I laughed nervously. "No, I don't. I grew up here. My parents, John and Laura." "Wait." His eyes softened a bit. "You mean the previous owners?" My breath hitched. "Previous owners. They sold the house about a month ago," he said gently. "We moved in last week." For a moment, everything around me blurred. The world tilted sideways. I felt the ground disappear from under my feet. "No, that's not possible," I whispered. "They would have told me. They would have." He stepped aside, slightly, his expression full of awkward sympathy. "I'm really sorry, miss. Their real estate agent handled everything. I think they left a forwarding address in one of the boxes." I barely heard him. My hands trembled as I backed away, stumbling down the steps. I could hear the faint hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, but it all sounded distant, like I was underwater. I sat on the curb, staring at the boxes, trying to piece it together. My parents had sold the house, our home, and left everything of mine outside, like I didn't exist. The first tear fell before I even felt it coming. I must have sat there for almost half an hour before I decided to call them. My fingers were numb as I scrolled through my contacts and pressed Mom. The line rang twice, then again. Then it went to voicemail. Mom, it's me, I said, my voice cracking. I'm home. Where are you? What's going on? No reply. I tried Dad next, straight to voicemail. That's when panic started to crawl in. I stood up and started checking the boxes. Maybe there was a note. Something. But all I found were fragments of my life. Old photos, college notebooks, a few clothes, and an envelope with my name on it. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 short sentences written in my mother's handwriting. Celine, we've moved on. Don't contact us. You're an adult now. Start your own life. The world fell silent. I stared at those words until they blurred through tears. Moved on? From what? From me? I sank down, clutching the letter, trying to breathe. My mind spun back to our last phone call a few weeks ago. Mom had sounded distant. I thought it was just stress. Dad barely spoke. But never, not once, did they hint at something like this. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. A car slowed near the curb. The same man from the house stepped out again, holding a plastic bag. Hey, you okay? He asked. You look pale. I wiped my face quickly. Yeah, I'm fine. Just processing. He hesitated, then handed me the bag. I found this inside one of the boxes. It's got some of your mail and, a keychain. It was the little silver keychain shaped like a moon. Celine, Mom had said once, you were named after the moon, always shining even in darkness. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I thanked him quietly and watched as he went back inside. That's when it hit me. I had nowhere to go. My dorm lease was over. My parents were gone. My savings barely covered a week of rent. I sat there, hugging my knees as the sky turned pink and orange. The neighborhood lights flickered on one by one, and with each one, the reality sank deeper. I was alone. That night, I found a cheap motel 2 towns away. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet, but it had a bed and Wi-Fi. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation, every missed sign. How could they just erase me? I opened my laptop, searching for their names. Maybe I could find a new address. But there was nothing. No trace. It was as if they'd vanished. Then something strange happened. I noticed a notification on my university email, an automated message about a financial withdrawal made by a guardian. I hadn't authorized anything. I clicked the message. My heart stopped when I saw it. My college trust fund, the one my grandparents had left for me, had been emptied 2 weeks ago. The authorized names were my parents. That was the moment shock turned into something else. Anger. Not loud or explosive. Quiet, cold anger that settled deep inside my chest. They hadn't just sold the house. They'd taken everything. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My whole life, I had trusted them. Every decision, every plan, every dream, they were supposed to be my foundation. But now that foundation was gone, shattered into pieces, scattered in damp cardboard boxes. At some point, I fell asleep, my phone still clutched in my hand. When I woke up, sunlight streamed through the blinds, and for a second, I forgot everything. Then I saw the letter on the nightstand, crumpled and tear-stained, and the memories came flooding back. That was the morning I decided I wasn't going to just disappear quietly. If they thought they could erase me, they were wrong. Somewhere between grief and disbelief, a new fire lit inside me, a need to understand why. Why had they done this? And what were they hiding? I packed my bag, took one last look at the motel room, and whispered to myself, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Then I stepped outside, ready to search for the truth. The morning air was cool against my face as I stepped out of the motel room. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a delivery truck and a few cars coated in dust. I adjusted the strap of my backpack, glancing at the sky. It was the same pale blue as it had been the day before, but somehow it felt different. The world looked unchanged, yet everything in me had shifted. I had no home, no savings, and no parents who would answer the phone. But I had questions, too many of them to ignore, and I wasn't leaving until I found answers. The first thing I did was stop by a nearby cafe. The place smelled like fresh coffee and toasted bagels, the kind of scent that could make you forget your problems for 5 minutes. I ordered a small coffee and sat near the window, flipping open my laptop. My fingers hesitated above the keyboard. I wasn't sure where to start. How do you track down people who didn't want to be found? I started with the basics: their names, old phone numbers, email addresses. Nothing. My parents didn't have social media. They'd always said they valued privacy. The irony wasn't lost on me now. Next, I searched property records, thinking maybe their names would appear somewhere else. Another house, another town. I found nothing under their names in our county. It was as if they'd scrubbed themselves off the map. I sat back, frustration knotting in my chest. Maybe I needed to think smaller. Who might have known what they were planning? Our neighbors? The real estate agent? The idea sparked something. I drained my coffee and left, catching the next bus back toward my old neighborhood. When I got off, the street looked even more foreign than before. The cherry tree was gone, but a faint outline of its roots still marked the soil, a ghost of what used to be. I knocked on the door of the house next to ours. A familiar face appeared. Mrs. Dalton, our elderly neighbor who used to give me cookies every Christmas. Her gray hair was pulled into a bun, and her eyes widened the moment she recognized me. "Celine? Oh, my goodness! Look at you!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that smelled faintly of lavender and sugar. "When did you get back?" "Yesterday," I said, forcing a small smile. "Mrs. Dalton, I came home, but the house, it's not ours anymore." Her smile faded. "Yes, I heard about that. Such a surprise. They sold it so suddenly. You knew." I asked, my heart racing. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the new house. "Your parents didn't say much, just that they needed to move quickly." I asked where to, but your mother said it was personal. They seem tense. Tense how? She sighed softly. "Your father barely looked me in the eye, and your mother, she seemed scared, Celine." I didn't press. I wish I had. Scared? The word hung in the air like static. I thanked her, and was about to leave when she reached into her pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. "This was left in my mailbox by mistake about 3 weeks ago. It's addressed to your father, but it came after they'd moved. Maybe it means something." I took it with trembling hands. The envelope was from a law firm downtown. "Thank you, Mrs. Dalton," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As soon as I turned the corner, I tore it open. Inside was a short notice, a debt settlement agreement addressed to my father, acknowledging the final transfer of property in lieu of repayment. Debt. My parents were always careful with money. They didn't even use credit cards unless necessary. So how had they gotten into such a mess that they'd had to sell the house? The more I read, the less sense it made. The document was stamped by a local firm, Turner and Bellman Associates. I made my way downtown, my steps quickening with every block. The law office was tucked inside a gray brick building that looked as tired as I felt. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. A receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Hi," I said, trying to sound calm. "I'm looking for information about a property settlement handled by your firm. The name's John Carter." She tapped at her keyboard, then frowned. "I'm sorry, we can't release client information." "I'm his daughter," I said quickly. "I'm just trying to understand what happened. Please, Her expression softened, but she still looked uncertain. I can't share financial details, but she glanced around, lowering her voice. If you want, you can talk to Mr. Bellman. He handled that case personally. He's in his office now. Moments later, I was sitting across from a man in his 50s with rimless glasses and a gray suit. His office was neat, too neat. Everything in perfect order. Miss Carter, you said you're John's daughter? Yes. He folded his hands. I'm afraid I can't disclose confidential matters, but I can tell you this. Your father made a voluntary property transfer to clear outstanding debts. What kind of debts? I pressed. He sighed. Multiple personal loans. It's unusual, to say the least, given his record. He was cooperative, but uneasy. Uneasy? He nodded slowly, like a man being forced to do something he didn't want to. He asked for everything to be handled quietly. No press, no trail. I felt my pulse quicken. Did he say where they were going? No, he said, but there was something odd. When I asked him for a forwarding address, he paused for a long time, then said, "Don't send anything. Just tell them we're safe." Safe. The word hit me like a whisper in an empty room. Safe from what? I thanked Mr. Bellman and left, my thoughts spinning faster than I could keep up with them. Outside, the wind had picked up, tossing leaves across the sidewalk. I stopped at a nearby bench, scrolling through my phone. There had to be another clue, something I was missing. That's when I noticed something strange in my email inbox. A message from an unfamiliar address sent the night before. Subject: Stop looking. Message: You won't find what you're searching for, Celine. My stomach dropped. I looked around instinctively, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Who could have sent that? It didn't come from my parents' old email. The sender's name was hidden behind random letters and numbers. For the first time, fear crept into the space where anger had lived. Someone was watching me, but fear wasn't going to stop me. That night, back in my motel room, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, the hum of the air conditioner, the creak of the walls, felt amplified. I checked the locks twice before sitting down with my notebook. I wrote everything I knew so far. The house was sold under pressure. There were debts my parents never mentioned. Someone didn't want me to investigate. It didn't add up. My parents were teachers, not gamblers or risk takers. What could they have possibly gotten into that made them sell our home and vanish? I thought about my father's last words on our last call. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Focus on your finals. Everything was not fine. The next morning, I decided to visit Dad's workplace. He'd been a high school history teacher at Westfield High. When I walked through those familiar halls, it felt like stepping into a memory. The smell of old books, the chatter of students, it was all the same, except he wasn't there. The receptionist told me he had resigned abruptly 3 weeks ago. No explanation. No forwarding address. I stood there, clutching the strap of my bag, trying to steady my breath. Then she added, he came in one last time to clear his desk. He looked nervous, said he had to go away for a while. Nervous, scared, uneasy. Every person who had seen my parents in their final days had used those same words. Before leaving, I checked his old classroom. The door was unlocked. The sunlight streamed across empty desks and a chalkboard half erased. I walked to his desk and opened the drawers. Nothing but a few pens and an old notebook. When I opened it, my heart skipped. Inside were pages of lesson notes, but tucked between them was a folded sheet of paper. A receipt for a safety deposit box at First Meridian Bank, dated 2 months ago, under both my parents' names. That was my next stop. At the bank, I showed my ID and the receipt. The clerk checked the system and nodded. It's active, but you'll need authorization to access it. My parents are missing, I said, voice trembling. Please, There has to be something you can do. She hesitated, then leaned closer. If you have proof of relation and a key, I can let you view the contents under supervision. I reached into my bag and pulled out my father's old keychain. It jingled softly, the tiny moon charm glinting in the light, and next to it, a small, unfamiliar brass key I'd never noticed before. It fit. Inside the box were a few documents, a flash drive, and a single photo, me as a child standing between my parents in front of our house. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 3 words: trust no one. The flash drive was encrypted, but one file name stood out even before I could open it: Project Halcyon. I stared at it, a chill crawling up my spine. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about debt. It was something bigger, something they were running from. For the first time since it all began, I wasn't sure if I truly wanted the answers I was chasing. But deep down, I knew there was no turning back now. The truth wasn't just hiding, it was protecting itself. And I was about to find out why. I stood in the middle of the bank's quiet vault room, my pulse echoing in my ears like a ticking clock. The flash drive felt heavy in my palm, though it couldn't have weighed more than a few ounces. Still, something about it, its cold metallic edge, its label written in my father's precise handwriting, felt like the weight of an entire hidden life. The clerk smiled politely. "Do you need me to make a copy of anything?" "No," I said too quickly, slipping the flash drive and photo into my bag. "Thank you. I have everything I need." As I stepped out into the sunlight, 1,000 questions chased each other in my head. Project Halcyon. I'd never heard those words before. It sounded technical, official, like something that didn't belong in an ordinary family story. My parents were teachers, not scientists or spies. But then again, they weren't who I thought they were anymore. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the street as I walked toward a small public library a few blocks away. It was quiet, almost deserted, and the perfect place to plug in the flash drive without drawing attention. I found a corner computer, sat down, and took a deep breath before inserting the drive. The screen blinked to life. A folder appeared with 3 files: letter.pdf, photos.zip, halcyon_records.mp4. My hand hovered over the mouse. The logical part of me said to open the letter first, but my heart, the part that had been broken, confused, desperate, wanted to see their faces. I clicked on the video file. The screen filled with static for a few seconds before a familiar voice cut through, my father's. "Celine," he began, his voice low, tight with urgency. The camera shook slightly as if he'd recorded it in a hurry. "If you're watching this, it means you found the deposit box. I'm sorry for everything, for leaving, for the confusion, but we had no choice." Behind him, I could just make out my mother pacing in the background, wringing her hands. "We weren't who you thought we were," he continued. "And I know that sounds impossible, but the truth is dangerous. Even now." My mother's voice came into frame, trembling. "Celine, you have to understand, we did everything to protect you. What we were part of, it wasn't supposed to go this far." My throat tightened. "What are you talking about?" I whispered to the screen. Dad looked directly into the camera. Halcyon was meant to help people. It started as a research project, one that studied behavioral patterns, memory, and emotional response. But it turned into something else, something people wanted to control. I leaned closer, my heart hammering. "They used our work," he said, "to manipulate decision-making quietly, subtly, through data, through algorithms, through systems people trusted. We tried to stop them. We exposed what we could. But once you challenge people with power, they erase you." Mom finally spoke again, her eyes glistening. "They took everything, Celine. Our names, our accounts, even our safety. That's why we left. That's why we couldn't tell you. If they knew you existed, The video cut off suddenly. I stared at the frozen frame. My parents caught mid-sentence, their faces a mix of fear and regret. I tried playing it again, but the file was corrupted, half of it gone, as if someone had deleted it intentionally. I sat there in silence, the hum of the library computers faint in the background. My parents weren't criminals. They were whistleblowers, and they had been running ever since. I opened the next file, letter.pdf, hoping it would fill in the gaps. Celine, if you found this, it means the truth has finally reached you. We wish we could explain everything, but the less you know, the safer you'll be. Still, you deserve to understand a part of it. Halcyon wasn't just a project. It was a test. We built a system that could predict behavior on a national scale. The data came from ordinary citizens, but it was used for decisions that affected millions. When we tried to expose the misuse, our lives were threatened. We couldn't trust anyone, not even old colleagues. One of them still works at the university. If you need proof, find Dr. Isaac Morrow. He was part of the original team. Please be careful. They watch everything. Mom and Dad. I read the letter twice, my hands trembling. My university was connected to this. I thought of the labs I'd walked past every day, the restricted wings of the research building no student was allowed into. It was starting to make sense in a horrifying way. I packed my things and left the library, my head buzzing with adrenaline. Outside, the street lights were flickering on, one by one. I could feel eyes on me. Or maybe it was just paranoia. But either way, I kept glancing over my shoulder until I reached the bus stop. That night, I couldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces frozen in that video, fearful, pleading. I thought about the email I'd received earlier. Stop looking. Whoever sent that knew what I was doing. The next morning, I went back to my university. The autumn air bit through my jacket as I crossed the familiar courtyard. Students laughed and chatted, completely unaware that the place might be tied to something dark and hidden. The name Dr. Isaac Morrow wasn't on the faculty directory, but the biology department's secretary told me he worked off-site at a research annex near the edge of campus. The annex was an old, half-abandoned building that used to belong to a government contractor. Most students avoided it. I pushed open the glass doors, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, the air smelled faintly metallic, like dust and electricity. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I made my way down a narrow hallway lined with frosted glass offices. A voice startled me. "You shouldn't be here." I turned sharply. A tall man stood at the end of the hall, wearing a gray lab coat. His hair was silver at the temples, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, studied me. "Dr. Morrow?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Who are you?" "My name's Celine Carter. You worked with my parents, John and Laura Carter." The moment I said their names, his expression changed. Shock flickered across his face, followed by something else, fear. "Come inside," he said quickly, ushering me into his office and locking the door behind us. Stacks of research papers and old hard drives cluttered every surface. A digital clock on the wall ticked loudly. "I shouldn't even be talking to you," he said. "If they find out." "If who finds out?" I demanded. "Please, I need to know what happened." He sat down heavily, rubbing his temples. "Your parents were brilliant. They were the conscience of our team." Halcyon started as an academic collaboration between the university and a private partner, Novasynth Technologies. The goal was simple, to use behavioral data to improve predictive learning models. But then, the funding changed hands. The new investors wanted more control. They turned it into a system for influence, political, social, even economic. I stared at him. "You're saying they used it to manipulate people?" He met my gaze. Not directly. They learned how to nudge choices, make people believe they were acting freely when they weren't. Your parents found evidence and tried to expose it. When they refused to stay quiet, the company shut the project down publicly but continued it elsewhere. And your parents became targets. The room felt suddenly colder. Targets. He nodded grimly. They came to me for help once. They thought I could erase their trail. I did what I could, but he looked at me, guilt-heavy in his eyes. They knew too much. I swallowed hard. Where are they now? Are they alive? He hesitated. I don't know, but if they sent you here, it means they trust you to finish what they started. I noticed a file on his desk labeled Halcyon Archives. Can I see that? He hesitated, then handed it over. This is everything I kept, copies of research notes, memos, data sets. But be careful. They monitor this network. Don't access anything from here. I tucked the folder into my bag and stood. Thank you, Dr. Moreau. He nodded, eyes wary. Celine, if they reach out to you again, run. I left the building, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The world outside felt sharper, louder, every shadow more alive than before. I caught my reflection in the glass door, wide eyes, pale face, a girl who'd walked into something much bigger than she understood. Back at the motel, I spread the documents across the bed. Pages filled with coded terms, acronyms, and patterns I barely understood. But one note stood out, written in my father's familiar scrawl. Phase 3 begins once data subjects reach threshold awareness. Subjects. Awareness. It sent a chill down my spine. Then, something clicked. My name, Celine, was mentioned in one of the data files. My initials, my birth date, all coded under S.Carter_17. I froze. I wasn't just their daughter. I had been part of it, a data subject. My entire childhood, the experiments, the behavioral tests my parents used to do for fun, the surveys, the family routines. It all rushed back in a flood of understanding. They hadn't been playing games. They had been collecting data from me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The truth wasn't just about what they'd done. It was about who I was. The photo from the safety box lay beside me, my parents smiling, innocent, loving. I touched the edge of it, my vision blurring. They hadn't abandoned me out of hatred or greed. They'd done it because they were trying to erase the proof, the living link to a project that had gone too far. The past they tried to bury wasn't just theirs. It was mine, too. And for the first time, I understood what my father had meant when he wrote, "Trust no one." The air felt heavy the next morning, like the world itself was holding its breath. I woke up in the small guest room at Aunt Marlene's, staring at the ceiling for what felt like hours, unable to silence the storm in my head. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing against the curtains, seemed louder, sharper, almost taunting. Today wasn't just another day. Today was the day I was finally going to face them. My parents, the people who had once kissed me goodnight, promised me the world, and now had stripped me of everything, my house, my belongings, and maybe even my sense of who I was. I sat up slowly, clutching the blanket as if it could hold together the pieces of me that felt like they were falling apart. A part of me still wished I could wake up and find out it was all some horrible misunderstanding. But the sight of my boxes piled up in Aunt Marlene's hallway, the same ones I'd found dumped outside the home I grew up in, was proof that this wasn't a dream. It was real. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. My pulse drummed in my ears as I got dressed. My fingers trembled slightly while buttoning my shirt, but I forced myself to breathe. I needed clarity, answers, closure. When I told Aunt Marlene I was going back to confront them, she didn't stop me. She just looked at me with those knowing eyes, as if she'd been expecting this moment. "Be careful what you dig up, Celine," she said softly, her tone both warning and compassionate. "Sometimes the truth doesn't just hurt, it changes everything." I nodded, though her words lingered in my chest like a quiet echo. The drive back to my old house felt endless. Every turn, every familiar landmark carried a ghost of memory. The corner cafe where Dad and I used to stop for hot chocolate on rainy days. The small bookstore Mom and I would visit on weekends. Everything looked the same, yet felt hollow, like the color had drained from the world. When I finally pulled up in front of the house, my breath hitched. It wasn't ours anymore, not legally, not emotionally. The new for sale sign still stood out front, though the sold tag beneath it looked fresh. The garden was trimmed, neat. Someone had been taking care of it. Someone else's hands were now tending the soil my mother once loved. I stood there for a long time, unable to move. Then the front door opened. My father stepped out. He looked older, somehow his hair more gray than I remembered, his face lined with something between exhaustion and guilt. When his eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of surprise that quickly turned to discomfort. He hadn't expected me. "Celine," he said, his voice uncertain. "Yeah," I replied quietly, my throat dry. "It's me." He stepped forward, his hand half lifting as if to reach for me, but he let it drop. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. We didn't know when you'd come back." "I came back to my home," I said sharply, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "Except it's not mine anymore, is it? You sold it. You sold everything." His face tightened. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple," I snapped. "Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my parents decided to erase me while I was gone." The silence between us thickened. I could see movement behind him through the open door, Mom's silhouette in the hallway. "Can I come in?" I asked. He hesitated. "Celine." "Please," I said, my voice softening, almost breaking. "Just let me in." He sighed, stepped aside, and I walked into what used to be my home. The moment I crossed the threshold, 1,000 memories crashed into me. The faint scent of lemon polish, the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. The photos that once lined the walls were gone, replaced with blank spaces where frames used to hang. My mother stood at the end of the hall, her expression unreadable. She looked composed, almost too calm, but her eyes darted nervously toward my father. "Celine," she began, "we didn't mean for you to find out this way." "This way?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean coming home from university to find my things dumped in the driveway like trash?" She winced. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. We thought we'd have time to." "To what? To tell me you sold the house I grew up in? The house you promised would always be mine to come back to?" "Celine, please," my father said, his tone weary. "There were reasons, things you don't understand." "Then make me understand." I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. "You owe me that much." Mom's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Dad rubbed his temples, pacing the living room floor, before finally sitting down on the couch. I stayed standing, my hands clenched at my sides. He finally said, "We were in trouble, Celine. Financial trouble. Bad decisions, bad timing, it all piled up." I felt my heart drop, but I forced myself to stay composed. "So, you sold everything? Without telling me? Without even giving me a chance to help?" "It wasn't just about money," Mom said suddenly, her voice cracking. "It was about what was tied to this house. What it held." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She exchanged a glance with Dad, the kind that carries years of unspoken words. He shook his head, but she ignored him. "Celine," she said quietly, "there are things about your childhood we never told you. Things we thought were better left buried. My pulse quickened. Like what? Dad stood abruptly. Not now, he said firmly. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I snapped. You already took everything from me. The least you can do is tell me the truth. The tension in the room was unbearable. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the table, steadying herself. It's not what you think, she said softly. But it's something that started long before you left for university. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. Then tell me, I whispered. Her gaze met mine, and for a moment the years of distance between us seemed to collapse. You remember when you were 10, and there was that summer you stayed with your aunt because the house was being renovated? I nodded slowly. Yeah, you said there was mold in the basement. She swallowed hard. There was no mold, Celine. I stared at her, waiting. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled. That summer, something happened, something we've tried to protect you from ever since. My heart pounded. Protect me from what? Dad finally broke his silence, his voice low but firm. From the truth, Celine. From the kind of truth that destroys families. I could feel my knees weaken. You're not making sense, I said, my voice shaking. What are you trying to tell me? But before they could answer, a sharp knock at the door startled us all. Dad stiffened instantly. Mom's face went pale. They exchanged another silent look, one filled with fear this time. Who's that? I asked. Neither of them moved. The knock came again, louder. Dad finally walked to the door and opened it just a few inches. A man stood outside, a tall figure in a dark coat, his expression serious. I couldn't see much of him, but I caught the edge of a badge clipped to his belt. Mr. Pierce, the man said, we need to talk. Dad's shoulders slumped. Now's not a good time, he muttered. The man's tone was firm. It's about the house. And the file you submitted last year. Something inside me twisted. What file? I demanded, stepping closer. The man's eyes flicked toward me, then back to my father. I take it you haven't told her. Enough, Dad said sharply. But it was already too late. That moment, his tone, his fear, told me everything I needed to know. There was something much darker than unpaid bills or bad investments. Something they'd been hiding beneath the surface, buried deep inside the walls of this house. The air seemed to tighten, the silence heavy with unspoken things. Mom finally whispered, Celine, please, just trust us for a little longer. But I couldn't, not anymore. My voice broke as I said, I don't even know who you are anymore. And as I turned toward the door, the man outside looked at me with a strange kind of sympathy. Miss Pierce, he said quietly, you deserve to know what's really going on. Behind me, I heard my mother gasp, and my father mutter something under his breath, a name maybe, but I couldn't make it out. The confrontation wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about something buried, something that had been haunting them for years, maybe haunting me, without my knowledge. As I stepped outside into the fading light, I realized this wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning of the truth they'd spent a lifetime trying to hide. The evening air clung to my skin as I stood outside the house that was no longer mine. The last trace of sunlight bled into the clouds, painting the sky in shades of fading gold and bruised gray. The man with the badge was still there, his shadow stretching long against the porch steps. Behind me, my parents' voices murmured, low, urgent, afraid. For a moment, I couldn't move. It felt like the ground beneath me had split open, and I was standing on the edge of something deep and dark. The kind of truth that didn't just change your life. It swallowed it whole. Miss Pierce, the man said again, his tone careful now. You might want to take a walk with me. I hesitated. Who are you? He showed me the badge properly this time. Detective Rowan, local precinct, your parents, and I have been in contact for some time. My throat tightened. About what? His gaze flicked toward the house, then back to me. Not here. I glanced back at my parents. My mother was standing frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed against her lips. My father's shoulders were slumped, his eyes hollow. Something inside me broke, quietly at the sight of them, two people I'd loved my entire life, now strangers built of secrets. Fine, I said. Let's talk. We walked down the street in silence, our footsteps crunching on the gravel. The air smelled faintly of rain, heavy with the promise of a storm. When we reached the park at the corner, he stopped near a bench and gestured for me to sit. I didn't. I crossed my arms, waiting. He studied me for a moment before speaking. Your parents sold the house because it wasn't safe anymore, not for them and not for you. My heart skipped. Safe? What are you talking about? He sighed. There was an investigation. Old case closed years ago, but certain property records resurfaced. Let's just say your father made some questionable decisions when he bought the land that house was built on. I frowned. What kind of decisions? He met my eyes. The land was never fully cleared for sale. There were previous owners who disappeared under strange circumstances decades ago. It was covered up, but your father knew parts of it. And when the bank started digging through the files during refinancing, everything unraveled. My pulse quickened. You're saying he hid something? That my dad was involved in, whatever that was? I'm saying he tried to protect his family. Rowan said, but secrets have a way of rotting whatever they're built on. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. The wind picked up, rustling the trees around us. So, the house wasn't just a home, I whispered. It was a lie built on another lie. He nodded slightly. Your parents didn't sell it to hurt you. They sold it to bury what was beneath it, for good. The words settled into me like cold rain. I turned away from him, staring across the park where children used to play when I was younger. Everything suddenly felt tainted. Every memory, every corner of my childhood. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. Thank you for telling me. He hesitated, as if there was more he wanted to say, but he only gave a polite nod. You deserve to know. Just be gentle with them. They've been carrying this for a long time. I left before he could say anything else. By the time I got back to Aunt Marlene's, the sky had opened up and rain poured in relentless sheets. I didn't bother with an umbrella. I let it soak through my clothes, cooling the fire burning under my skin. When I stepped inside, she was waiting in the kitchen, a cup of tea already on the table. Her eyes softened when she saw me. You found out something, didn't you? I nodded, sinking into the chair. Enough to understand why everything fell apart. She reached across the table, her hand warm against mine. Sometimes understanding doesn't make it easier. She was right. It didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every word, every glance, every memory that now felt rewritten. The laughter echoing through the hallways, the birthdays celebrated in the living room, the fights that ended in apologies. It was all built on something fragile, something false. But beneath the ache, a strange kind of clarity began to take root. Maybe it wasn't just the house that had been built on fragile ground. Maybe I had been, too. In the morning, I decided to go back one last time. The house looked different in the daylight, smaller, quieter, stripped of warmth. I didn't knock. I just stepped inside, and to my surprise, neither of my parents stopped me. They were sitting at the kitchen table, facing each other, but saying nothing. The air between them felt exhausted. Dad looked up first. You talked to him? Yes, I said softly. And I know now. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We never wanted it to come to this. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. But I also need to understand something. Dad nodded slowly. Anything. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth before it came to this. Why build everything around a secret that was bound to break us? He exhaled deeply, rubbing his hands together. Because we wanted to protect the version of your life that was untouched by it. You were our clean slate, Celine. The one thing that wasn't tainted by what came before. For a moment, the anger I'd been holding on to flickered out. There was just sorrow, deep and human. Mom whispered, we thought if we pretended hard enough, we could start over. But the past doesn't forgive pretending. I sat down slowly. Neither does love if it's built on lies. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of things breaking quietly inside all of us. And then, unexpectedly, I remembered something from when I was little, building forts out of blankets in the living room. I'd call it my house inside the house. Mom used to laugh and bring me snacks. Dad would peek in pretending to be my neighbor. Back then, it was just play. Now, sitting in the ruins of everything I thought was real, I realized maybe that's what I needed again. A house inside myself. Something no one could sell, break, or hide from. I stood up. I'm leaving, I said quietly. Mom's face crumpled. Where will you go? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I can't rebuild my life here. Not when every wall feels like it's listening to ghosts. Dad swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. We just wanted you to forgive us. I do, I said after a pause. But forgiveness doesn't mean staying. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled new, like soil after a storm. I looked back once more at the house, the cracked window on the right, the porch swing still swaying slightly in the wind. It no longer looked like the home that raised me. It looked like a shell, a monument to everything we'd lost. I walked away without looking back again. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, just a single bedroom, peeling wallpaper, a leaky faucet, but it was mine. Every nail I hammered, every picture I hung, felt like reclaiming a part of myself. At night, I'd sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Sometimes the loneliness hit hard, like an echo that wouldn't fade. But other nights, there was peace in the quiet. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since high school. Page after page, I poured out everything I'd been holding in. The anger, the confusion, the memories I didn't trust anymore. And slowly, the pages became bricks. Words became walls. I was building again, not with wood or concrete, but with understanding, with truth, with boundaries that couldn't be taken away. One night, as I finished another entry, I looked around the small apartment and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't the place that mattered. It was the space I was creating within myself. A safe one, a strong one. The house I built inside me had no address, no deed, no fragile foundation of lies. It was made of everything I'd learned, resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to stand on my own. And as I turned off the light that night, I realized I no longer needed to go back. Because for the first time in my life, I was home. The house I built inside me no longer trembled with the echoes of fear or guilt. Its walls, once paper-thin and fragile, had thickened with truth, forgiveness, and something softer, acceptance. Every corner carried the scent of my own becoming. The rooms that once held shadows now glowed with quiet resilience, and the windows opened to skies I had never dared to look at before. I realized then that peace wasn't something found in others. It was something built, brick by brick, with the courage to stay when everything in you wants to run. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by the past or chasing the truth. I was simply here, breathing in the stillness I had earned. And as I stood in that silence, I finally understood. Healing isn't the end of a story. It's the home you build when you choose to live again.